Very happy to have with us today Will Strickler, tremendous bassist based in the Cincinnati area. You can catch Will performing at all the great clubs in the Midwest, BluJazz, Bop Stop, Cliff Bells. Will's got a chance to work with Dan Wilson, Doc Robinson, Chris Jamison. That's just to name a few. So, Will, thanks so much for joining me today.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for having me. An honor to be on here.
Thank you. So, Will, let's talk about when you made the decision that this was what you were going to pursue professionally, because a lot of people, they say, "Oh, I'm thinking about becoming a musician or going to music school," but then there's some who have the passion that say, "This is what I want to do. I know who I am." When did that happen for you, you think?
Yeah, great question. I mean, when I was looking at my undergrad, I started off at the College of Worcester and I did a semester there and I had a great time there, but it was kind of, small town there. And after I think being a month in there, I kind of realized I was like, wow, there's really not a lot of opportunity to go play live music here. I gotta get into a city where I can do that. So I transferred to Capital University, and I have a distinct memory of being at the Columbus Jazz and Ribs Fest my sophomore year because I went to Capital to study like audio production and recording. I think a lot of musicians maybe go through this like, well, being a musician, everyone tells me it's really hard, so I got to have a plan B, or I got to do something else. So I was like, all right, maybe doing the recording technology would be, that's a good plan B. And I remember being at Columbus Jazz and Ribs Festival. My buddy was like, "Oh, let me introduce you to the sound engineer." And it was Bobby Sanabria's Latin jazz big band playing. And I just remember being like, "Man, I don't care about being the sound engineer. Like I'm trying to go talk to the bass player." And in that moment, I realized if I'm ever in the studio handing a bass to someone else and they're going to record, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be too happy about that. I think I want to be the one that's playing bass. So that was kind of the moment for me where I was like, all right, time to go all in and yeah, see where this thing takes me.
Did practicing the bass and overall study, listening to music, was that's where everything changed too, or you were pretty deep into it already at that point, you think?
I think I was somewhat deep into it already at that point. Not as deep as I could have been, or looking back on it, yeah, I wish I would have practiced it a little more intensely then. But I think that was kind of the moment where it was like, okay, time to really focus in on, all right, making sure I run my scales, try to focus on my technique, and kind of made the switch from, oh, this is fun to do, to like, all right, this is not going to be the fun thing to do all the time, but it's worth it to get through that and
Playing the
scale.
bass is just, I mean, obviously every instrument is important when it comes to playing jazz, but the bass controls an aspect of the sound that, it could change anything that happens with one note. So, what do you think it is about, yourself that the reason the phone rings is I'm calling Will for this gig? What do you hope to bring to the bandstand, or and what do you hope they see in you overall?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the cool thing about music, to me, is that it's a chance to, like, there's so much rhythm around us in life, right? Like between the seasons, between weather, between growing crops. Like rhythm has been this fundamental part of humanity progressing since the beginning of time to where we are when people figured out, oh, if I rotate these crops so I can grow these, or the rhythm of figuring out you know, uh, how to make something in a manufacturing plant, or whatever it might be. So I've always felt like music is this one chance we have to almost kind of like tap into this same life force. And obviously, when we're playing music and you know um, we're not growing crops, or doing that kind of thing, but it's that same energy almost. So I guess I kind of try to. I think that um, I try to think think about, sorry, let me say that again. Think about the like, understand and give give to the situation what's appropriate in the moment. And if that means that it requires me to really take charge and take the lead in that moment, so be it. If it means I'm sitting back in a more supportive role, so be it. I think also understanding and listening for what the I've had the honor of working with a lot of really great singers, and I think a lot of the times, certainly there are a lot of singers that know a lot about music, right? And but there's some singers that they're really great singers, and maybe they couldn't tell you, oh, I want this groove or I want this note, but I think I have an ability to kind of read and listen to and hear, even if they don't give me any, even if it's something, oh, I want this section to be more like bubbly and purple. I'm
Well,
like,
let
okay,
me let me interject just for once because
please.
I wanted to just you were talking before about the how time, the way the world moves, is this linear thing and
Hmm.
the rhythm of life. So would you say that you look at the bass as a vehicle to tap into the rhythm of life, that almost like I am in charge of the rhythm when I play this instrument. Where the time is moving, the overall feeling of it. So, rhythm is something that you think about primarily, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think vibration too. I know I don't necessarily buy into you got to tune to what is it, 432 because that's the vibration of the universe. But I understand and appreciate the idea for sure that we're all these atoms vibrating around, and to me the bass is very much um, and I say this too, having done some gigs for a while, I was playing with a pop singer. I didn't use a bass amp, and I was just using in ears. And I was like, man, why does this doesn't feel the same? This is like,
With the in-ear
it,
monitors, it's just like,
yeah, it's just like I can hear myself, but I don't feel myself. There's not that air moving. There's not that vibration. So yeah, I feel like of all instruments, bass just having that you feel it so much, and that vibration I think is so feels like it's so fundamentally connected to that kind of earth rhythm, whatever you want to
well,
call it, a thing.
Charlie Hayden used to talk about he wanted his bass to sound like the wood of the tree and, real sort of this earthly thing. So what you're talking about kind of, relates to that. And, he was also one of the masters and tremendous performer. And, you're a professional, you're a performer, you're, tremendous on this instrument. So I wanted to also ask you, what do you love most about performing? Is it being in the moment? Is it the audience? Is it the way the day flows about the when you're going to have a gig? What do you love most about getting on stage?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think all those things you mentioned there, um, I love, and I'm thankful that so many of the gigs I do these days now are very open to the spontaneous and creative and whatever happens in the moment. And I just love being able to get up in a context and kind of almost, right, really, really get a chance to experiment and try some things without, I'm not doing brain surgery on someone. I'm not sending a rocket into space. If I mess up, if it's a train, if the song train wrecks, that's the worst thing that's going to happen. So I really enjoy that gamble, if you will. I'm not one for casinos, but when it comes to calling a tune or calling like that's my type of gambling there. I get that. I
I
feel
like
like
how
I
you
get
said
like
that, if I make a mistake, it's not the end of the world, like a brain surgeon, because so many musicians and myself included, we treat performing as sort of a life or death situation. We want everything to go
mhm.
perfectly, and that can really be harmful, and lead to our success not being where we want it to be and not feeling we're successful. So success as a musician is a very personalized thing. Some people view it as I have 1 million streams or I have 50,000 followers. What does success mean to you, as a professional musician at this point? 1 p.m. November 14th, because it's going to change. But what does success mean to you now?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think playing music that I'm proud of and I'm happy for people to that I want people to see and experience, and I'm proud of the music that I'm playing, um, is kind of the number one thing. Um, and then kind of underneath that, I think as long as I'm still enjoying music and listening to music, and if I can still go to concerts and be an audience member there, and um, I appreciate that. I never want to get to that that jaded, burnt out point of like, oh, well, I do music for a living, so I should don't really listen to much music. Like, um, I heard a couple musicians say things like that a few years ago, and it really like set me on a like, oh, okay, I got to make sure that I don't want to fall into because I love music so much. It's not worth losing what music is just to make a career in it or
Yeah, I've
satisfy my ego of making a career, you know?
sure. And I've seen some of my heroes play, and you could tell how jaded they were. And and I promised myself, I'm like, I'm never gonna be like that. So, in a way, the way you're looking at this career is probably you still have the same excitement about it now as you did when you were starting out.
I think so. Yeah. Um, yeah, and that's kind of funny. I feel like the further I get into writing and composition and I just put out an EP with a group of mine called Parallel Structures. Right, we're doing the EP release show tonight actually, and cordless group, two saxophones, bass, and drums. And it's kind of funny. The more I started, writing and getting into this group, the more I started tapping into the music I used to listen to, when I was 15, 16, like, hip hop, metal, a lot of electronic music, a lot of stuff that's not really chordal, doesn't really have chord progressions in it necessarily. Um, so yeah, and I feel like with this new project, it's kind of like the more I learn stuff and do more stuff in the future, I also find myself going further backwards too, and yeah, checking out stuff that yeah, what was it that really got me into music to begin with? Oh, super heavy Metallica riff, like, oh, okay, how can I apply this in this new context? So,
No, I still play Seek and Destroy and Enter Sandman
oh,
with my students like
yes,
almost on a weekly
classics.
basis. So I totally get it. Was metal what you were, checking out? Did that's what grabbed your attention
Yeah.
that got you more serious?
Yeah, I would say so. It's always been kind of a strange thing to me that I've never quite been able to figure out because I consider myself generally a pretty happy, pretty cheerful um type person, but for whatever reason it's like the saddest, angriest music just that's what just gets me. So yeah, yeah. Metal is definitely one of the first from like 80s, checking out like the Iron Maiden, Metallica. Of course, yeah, like you said, I mean, what was it? Kill 'Em All, that Metallica album with Seek and Destroy on it. That was one of the first albums I ever bought. Up through some of the modern, metalcore, prog metal, whatever, all the different genres type stuff. But yeah, yeah, I don't know why it is, but something about that dark, dark anger, aggressive stuff just speaks to me in a way
Yeah.
that doesn't
So,
make
and
sense to me.
being a musician performing, the a lot of the times we're waiting for the gig at night
Mhm.
that's going to take place. So, kind of walk me through like a day in the life of like when you have a performance going on. Like, do you have to practice for a certain amount of time? Do you, have any, rituals or anything like that? So, what happens before you take the stage?
In the ideal world, I've done all my practicing the weeks leading up to it, and day of, I try not to touch the instrument a whole lot. Maybe just run through some, put the metronome on 60 and practice, playing quarter notes, eighth notes, just some real basic kind of fundamental warm up technique stuff. Does it always happen like that? Do I occasionally, find myself like, oh, let me just run through this tune, let me make sure I run through this tune to make sure I'm good? Yes, sometimes that does happen more than I'd like to admit. But as far as rituals go, I um, I try to just get my body prepped for it, and if I can get a run in or work out, hit the gym a little bit, take the dog out, um, make sure I'm eating, but I'm not eating stuff that's gonna make me tired, or I'm not smashing that fish and chips or whatever deep
Yeah.
fried food
Stuffed
that
mashed
day.
potato and filet mignon before you go on stage.
Yeah, yeah, save that for after the gig for sure. Um, and yeah, yeah, I'd say that's a
You
general
know,
goal.
you're so passionate about, playing and all these different situations that's playing with singers, and you're talking about playing in one of the hippest musical configurations there is, two saxes, bass and drums.
Yes.
That's so hip. Where do what's the best non-musical experience that you've had that's directly inspired your music, you think?
Oh, I think any of my students can attest to this. But food for sure is my um, food for sure is my. I never want it to be a career, profession or anything, but as far as a hobby goes and something that I love and something that I take a lot of inspiration for into my music, um, and honestly, I feel like was almost like a pivotal moment in my bass playing. I remember, I think it was a Thanksgiving dinner, um, or potluck or whatever, and I was making mashed potatoes for it, and I remember as I was making the mashed potatoes, thinking like, yeah, these are some good mashed potatoes. I wouldn't want to eat them on my own. They're kind of boring on their own. Um, but in the context of everything else, it really supports it brings the rest of the meal together. And I was like, oh, what if I took that same approach to my bass playing too? You know, um, I think I find myself liking bass players or bass lines that like by themselves are not the most interesting. I mean, you mentioned Charlie Hayden earlier, and I think he's definitely in that category of. I have this kind of category of bass players where I'm like, it's not really transcribing their bass lines doesn't seem to me like the best thing to do because what they're doing, there's nothing crazy or complicated to what they're doing. They're playing a lot of roots, a lot of fifths, like Hans Glaschwinnig, Scott Colley, a lot of other great bass players, but it's nothing mind blowing. They just do it in such a amazingly every note is so precisely put exactly where it should be, such a beautiful way. Um, and I don't mean to undersell or sound when I say it's not complicated. I just mean from a harmonic sense. It's not like oh crazy they're using the flat nine on the major chord or whatever. It's like just your kind of rudimental like fundamental bass playing, but just done at this masterful top level.
Oh yeah, I mean, and I, you talk about Charlie Hayden, and his sound was, you say it's not that complicated and things like that. When I think about Charlie Hayden, I don't think about the notes. I just think about the sound overall,
Exactly.
like
Exactly.
the way his bass sounded. Are you consciously trying to get your sound to be where it needs to be, or are you kind of in a good place right now where there's things that you'd like to improve on? But where you are in that part of your journey?
Yeah, I think honestly tone and sound is a huge thing for me that I'm working on now. I think I spent a long time in the mindset of which, I'm not mad I spent time in the mindset of like, oh, the tone's all in the fingers or y- um which I think certainly is true to a degree, but also understanding like what are the strings that my fingers respond to best? What's the bass my fingers respond to best? What are the amp settings? Um, I think just being younger, my first teaching gig out of college was at Guitar Center, so I dealt with a lot of, the people coming in like, oh, I'm looking for that 1963 P bass to really get that like, or this, whatever Marshall sound, and I was just like, oh, I don't want anything to do with that, like whatever, forget about tone, it's all about rhythm and it's all about the notes. And now I'm definitely like, no, tone is a key component of music. So yeah, I think tone is definitely something I'm really focusing a lot more on recently than I have in the past.
No, that's great. Who would you like to work with if you got a chance to? Anyone come to mind? Whether someone alive, or it could be someone who's passed that you would have wanted to work with.
Um, I think mostly it's there's a lot of great groups out right now that I really love what they're doing. Miguel Zanon's quartet um, is one of my favorites. Everything Joel Ross does, the vibes player out of Chicago. Those are I think the two top groups that come to me of like, oh, if I see either of those guys put out an album online. It's like whatever I had in the queue is off. I'm putting that up next. I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah, the other question I wanted to ask you was, uh, it was just in my head. What was it? Okay, yeah, yeah. Now I remember what I was going to ask you. If you could go back to any of all the concerts that you've played in your life, and you had to put it on Groundhog Day, just relive this one concert that you
Oh,
got to perform. Does anything come to mind, or maybe a tour or something that was just so special? And what was it about it that was so special?
oh wow. Um, that is a tough one. It's funny. I feel like so many gigs in the past that I've done in the past, I would love to, if I could go back and almost like relive it or experience it again with my understanding and knowledge of life and music now, um, would be pretty fun, and just kind of wild to see. There's one gig I remember doing in high school with some buddies. We just, we had a band we put together playing some like Bob Marley tunes, Cream. I don't even remember what else. And then
Did you play
there was
Layla or Black Room or no White Room? I'm sorry.
White Room. I think we did. I think we did. Yeah. And I remember finding a CD of that like 5 years later and listening to the CD and being like, wait, what? This is us in high school? Like it sounded way better than I expected it to sound. And then I don't know what happened to that CD. It got lost. I haven't been able to find it since. Um, and I had recordings, I heard recordings from other concerts I did around the time. So like that was definitely a things just lined up on that day because like I heard other gigs I played around that time and they're not nearly as good. So that one stands out to me, I guess, as one that's like I don't know how that happened, but yeah, that would be interesting to go back and see what went
No, it
down
was,
from that.
you're saying that it was actually way better than you thought. And when it comes to writing music, there are things that, sometimes we struggle writing a piece of music. Have you ever written something that I like to use the phrase that it wrote itself? It just like that, it just came to you.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Anyone in particular that comes to mind?
Yeah, there was one in college I wrote. I called Slow Motion Samosas, and I remember I just sat down on the piano and
Samosas, like the food?
samosas, like yeah, like the little Indian dumplings.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um, and it was kind of it wasn't quite a ballad, but it was like it was around like a 90 BPM, I think. So I guess that's where the slow motion came in. Um, but yeah, that was definitely one I remember just sitting down on the piano, and then it just kind of 30 minutes later I had it written out. Um, and yeah, I think that it's an interesting thing to me because I think certainly, especially in the present times, we deal a lot with musicians that were not necessarily of great moral character, but they wrote some really influential music. Whether that's what was it? I like right like Mahler or like I mean even someone like R. Kelly or or Michael Jackson. There's a lot of musicians with some questionable um, things. So it's always been an interesting kind of question to me of like the idea that these songs, because then I hear like you said, like other musicians talk about the songs almost kind of already out there, and your job as a composer is just to be a conduit and let that song come through. So
Do you know that trombone player Frank Rosolino?
yeah, yeah.
He like played the jazz trombone in such a it's no one played trombone like him, but he like I think shot his family and shot himself or
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah. So, and again,
it's
I know this is
crazy.
it's a very controversial topic, and I certainly understand the all the sides to it. So I'm not trying to say one way or another, but um, how much of the composition to me is the artist, and how much is a thing that already was, and that artist happened to be the conduit for it, if that makes sense.
No, no,
something
no, totally. This has been great. It's been so great to see you. And the podcast we're on, we're almost at 20 episodes. So, I hope we'll definitely get a chance to do this again. So, thank you
Please,
so
yeah,
much
that'd be
for
great. Absolutely.
where can
Thanks for
people
having me
find
again.
you and, social media, anything, website that you want to
Yeah,
plug?
yeah. WillStricklerMusic.com is my website, or on Instagram, Will Strickler. My two main bands, Parallel Structures. We got an EP out. It's on Spotify. It'll be out on Bandcamp. Waves
MySpace.
Collectivos. Yeah, getting that one together. Just got to rearrange my top eight.
Yeah, you got to get on once it's on MySpace, then your career goes
Yeah,
to a
yeah.
whole
Then
other.
everyone can make it their little profile song. I miss that when people could make their.
Yeah, that was
Yeah,
cool.
Facebook doesn't give you that option. And then Waves Collectivo is my Latin jazz project. We've got a bunch of albums out on Spotify and Bandcamp and everywhere else.
Well, great. Well, Will, thanks so much for being with me today.
Absolutely, thank you, Abe. Yeah.